How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. We are finally in that end of the year season where all the big games release. I am so excited because for the first time in a long time, every game that's coming out is tailored to my taste. I've got Silent Hill F on my plate. I've got Dying Light the Beast. I've got Tokyo Extreme Racer on my Steam Deck, which just got announced for the PS5 coming next year. So there's a ton of stuff to play, like to the point that I'm forgetting things. So let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. We have a packed news video today, starting out with the real reason why Sony revised the PS5 Slim. It's actually pretty interesting. Then second on the list, we're going to talk about how Sony just revealed that the PS5 generation is their most successful ever. And finally, I've been playing a ton of Dying Light the Beast. I am so happy. It is exceeding all of my expectations in terms of performance and overall quality. It's living up to everything I wanted. So I'm going to do a little review to close out the video. Before I jump into it, it would really help me out if you subscribe to the channel, set your notifications to all. And if you're watching on mobile and you see the hype button below the video, I guess that's a new thing that really helps videos get out there. So if you could do any of those things, I would really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to my pleas. Let's get into the first news story here though, because this one's pretty interesting. So this whole conspiracy theory surrounding the PS5 Slim revision has kind of like ballooned out of control, mainly because, you know, they reduced the storage. You used to get a 1 terabyte SSD inside the PS5 Slim, which was an increase over the original PS5, which had around 825 gigabytes on its drive. And then they are going back to that. So this new version has less storage, which means like 825 is on board. But if you include the operating system and all the system files, you get like 650 gigabytes of usable space right out of the box. And since you have to install every game to the PlayStation 5, that gets eaten up pretty dang quick, which is frustrating because there's no price reduction to go along with it. They've done some sales in the UK and other places in Europe, but those sales still leave it above the MSRP it was at when it launched. So you're paying more for less storage, and that's a bummer. So that's why I'm kind of relieved that we now know they've done some actual hardware revisions to this thing to justify its existence outside of making it cheaper to produce so they can sell it for the same price and ship more of them on a boat and increase their profit margin. And of course, this is coming from Austin Evans. He's made like a series of these. Every time Sony releases a brand new PS5, he does everything he can to get his hands on it before anyone else, completely tears it down, compares it to the other PS5s, and figures out what's new. And that's exactly what he did here. I was actually in the first video that completely went crazy because he said it's worse, because it turned out that they reduced the motherboard size by around half, which meant that they put less copper in it, which meant less cooling, and then it also drew more power. So there were worries that it would overheat, you know, cause heat damage as time went on. But as we've seen, any game like Final Fantasy 16 or some other ones over the years that will overheat and shut down your PS5, they do it to everyone. They do it to the launch models, they do it to the revised models, even some PS5 Slims. If you get too much dust inside the fan, they're more prone to overheating. So the overall reduction in cooling didn't really matter. And in fact, Digital Foundry said that the original PS5, like the launch model, was kind of overkill with the amount of cooling. So they actually brought it to where it should be. I don't think it was that big of a deal, but it did cause a big drama point all over the internet, and they've done multiple revisions since then. But this one, it turns out, is taking a feature from the PS5 Pro that will extend the longevity of your console. So going back years, there was this big sort of drama point, just like the original PS5 revision, around the liquid cooling that the APU uses in the PS5. And long story short, if you attempted to repair your PS5 yourself, the liquid metal could leak out, and that would cause heat damage on your APU, which obviously will result in worse performance out of your PS5. It popped up again because the PS5 Slim original model had a weird issue where the same thing was happening. And then we got the PS5 Pro, where Sony went into the motherboard and created like a little tray for the liquid metal that put ridges around the APU's shield so that there's no risk of ever losing any of the liquid metal, and it evenly disperses it around the APU. So the whole thing will get even cooling from the liquid metal, which is great. I don't know the technical reasons why liquid metal is better than like regular liquid cooling or the old style of cooling, but you know, it was a big point in the marketing that, you know, this thing is working hard to get the best performance, and if they cool it better, it'll get better performance over longer periods of time. So that's why liquid metal is still worth using and why it's worth iterating on to get these ridges from the PS5 Pro on the new PS5 Slim, because it does have those ridges on the new revision of the PS5 Slim. And that's good because Sony has been pretty clear that going into the next generation, we're going to see the same thing happen where, you know, this one had a lot of PS4 and PS5 games where the PS5 version was the PS4 version with a patch. And that's why so many games we got in the early half of this generation ran so well on the PS5. They were basically upscaled scaled PS4 versions using like PC settings on PS5, which was awesome. So next generation, the same thing's going to happen. We're going to get a cross-generational gap where there's a lot of PS6 games coming out that are PS5 games with a patch, and I'm assuming a lot of people are going to want to hang on to their PS5s as long as possible. So knowing that Sony is taking active steps to make sure that this thing is going to last a long time is good, because people are going to want to do that. But the silver lining is, if you don't have this version of the PS5 Slim, we haven't really seen very many hardware issues at all with the PS5. I know there's a bunch that have created news stories that like everyone, including myself, have talked about, but if you go back to earlier generations like the PS3 and PS4, PS3 had a notorious issue that would affect every PS3 at some point, which is the Blu-ray laser burning out, because even though you could and mostly had to install games to the PS3, it was checking the disc more frequently, and I had it happen, all my friends had it happen, it really sucked. PS4 had a lot of issues, you know, the fans would get caked up with dust, it would overheat and fry your chip, which sucked. The disc drives in the PS4 Pro were kind of 50-50 shot in terms of breaking after just a few months, and the warranty system sucked. With the PS5, we haven't had any major huge issues with this stuff, and I think that's good, because, you know, they've released so many revisions of it to make it as small and light as possible so they can make more money, and it's kind of impressive that none of those revisions have caused any major hardware issues. The other change they made, I don't know why it took them so long to do it, but you know that black plastic strip that's in the middle of the PS5 between the two plates, the glossy one that's very similar to the original PS4's glossy plastic that attracts scratches like no other? I seriously, like, this is a metaphor or a joke or whatever that people use. You can breathe, and if there's dust in the air that's too thick, it'll put scratches on that thin black piece of plastic. Like my PS5 Pro that I literally bought, opened up, did a video on, and put behind my TV. I was checking it out the other day, and it has scratches all over that plastic somehow, and I've only touched it about 2 or 3 times. So that plastic sucked. People have been begging Sony to do something about it this entire generation, and this new revision of the PS5 Slim has matte black plastic in the middle. Yes, they figured out how to use matte plastic just like they did in the PS4 generation, and that's a good visual indicator that, you know, if you're buying this thing used on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or even eBay, that it's the version of the PS5 that has reduced storage, because, you know, the launch PS5s all have less than a terabyte, and now there's 2 different versions of the Slim. One of them is less than a terabyte, so it's nice to see a not changeable visual indicator that it is the reduced storage version of the PS5. So no one can like trick you into buying one with less storage, because, you know, the difference between 850 and a terabyte isn't that big of a deal, but it could mean 1 extra game on the SSD, which is nice. They've also reduced the size of the motherboard once again, because, you know, they can iterate on this stuff as time goes on. That just makes it cheaper to produce because it's a lighter console, which means, you know, they're getting charged less for shipping. People are saying that the copper has been reduced again, but like, I'm gonna be real, looking at these 2 motherboards side by side, I can definitely tell that the copper is a different color, but like, if they use less, I can't tell. To my eye, honestly, it looks like they use more because of the way that the copper is bent around the motherboard. It looks like it's a longer strip of copper. We've seen them reduce this over and over again throughout this generation. And again, no one has complained about heating issues, so I'm not gonna let that become a big sticking point for me. The only real criticism point, in my opinion at least, is the only real one, which is the price versus storage comparison. So if you buy a PS5 Slim, the first purchase you should make is a bigger SSD. And thankfully, this late in the generation, unlike the PS5 itself, SSD prices have fallen dramatically, so you can get much more storage for a lot less. It sucks that that's money that could go towards a game, but any game you buy needs to be installed to the PS5, so there's really no way around the fact that you need increased storage with any PS5 you pick up. But let's move on to the second news story here, which is coming directly from Hideaki Nishino, the new CEO of PlayStation. That kind of like, you know, he had the 2 CEO thing going on with Herman Hulst, then we got Concord, and Herman Hulst now just oversees games. You know, he hasn't been CEO that long, but in my opinion, he's done a good job. The hardware's been great. There's a lot of first-party single-player games being announced. Concord is far off in the distance, so, you know, like any CEO is just a CEO, but it's hard to do worse than Jim Ryan, so he's doing better than Jim Ryan, if you ask me. And a big announcement he made during the Tokyo Game Show is that this is the most profitable generation that Sony's ever had. It's more profitable than the PS4. Even though the PS5 is selling worse than the PS4, they're making more money, which is good for Sony and good for us, because it means they'll continue to invest in games to put on the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation brand itself. It's really interesting when you think about it, because if you look at the sales numbers for a lot of the single player games, they're dramatically worse than anything we saw in the PS4 generation. They're not bad, they're just not bigger or even up to the level that we saw during the PS4 generation. So how could Sony be making more money? It's really easy to figure out. Of course, they introduced 3 different versions of PS Plus. You've got Essential, you've got Extra, you've got Premium. But on top of that, they raised the prices across the board after they introduced those 3 models, where they also raised the price of PS Plus Essential during that time. So they're making more money off of subscriptions, because if you have a PS5, you're at the very least going to subscribe to PS Plus Essential to get that online connectivity and the free games every month. So they're probably raking in more money just with the same amount of people, if not a little bit less, from subscriptions, because they've raised the prices. Games have gotten more expensive. There's $70 games, there's $80 games, there's $120 Ultimate Edition games. Like across the board, gaming has gotten more expensive in terms of the price of software. So people are spending more money on the same amount or less games. So they're making more money on the back end there. And also the amount of live service games is more than ever. And the amount of successful live service games is more than ever. You've got Fortnite, you've got Call of Duty, Battlefield 6 is coming out. There's games like Genshin Impact. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of successful free-to-play live service games. And every time you make a purchase in one of those games for a battle pass, for a skin, for anything that costs money for a microtransaction, Sony gets 30% of that money. So they're just absolutely raking it in off of these free-to-play live service games. So, you know, at the end of the day, they can kind of afford to take a little bit of a hit on some of the single player stuff. And that's why during the first half of the generation, we saw them focus so much on making a live service game of their own. That's where the real money is at. And I'd assume it will just continue to be the most profitable generation ever, because next year we have Grand Theft Auto 6, and that's going to be the biggest game of all time. Like, they're going to make so much money off of Grand Theft Auto 6. Like, they don't even have to worry about splitting with Xbox or PC, because the game's not coming to PC until a year after it comes out, and Xbox is losing players by the day. So as far as being the most profitable generation for them, in my opinion, there's no trickery going on here. Games have gotten more expensive. Subscriptions have gotten more expensive. There's a lot of PS5s out there. There's a lot of PS4s out there. They've supported PS4 players who are continuing to pay for games, and PS Plus as well. Their whole engagement metric, where they want as many people on PlayStation platforms as possible, it's paying dividends, obviously, because people are spending money on and in PlayStation games. So that's good. But speaking of great games, I got to review Dying Light the Beast, because this is a game that you should definitely play if you're a fan of zombie games. So if you've played the original Dying Light, you know exactly what you're getting here. It's an open world game featuring Kyle Crane, but this takes place 13 years later, where in that time, he's been trapped in a lab because you get infected with the zombie virus in the first game, and they've been experimenting on him to basically make him the most ripped man on planet Earth. And then he gets out, and shocker, he's in the same area of Europe that Dying Light 2 takes place in, which, you know, kind of made me worried, because this started out as an expansion for Dying Light 2 and then became its own standalone game. They did a lot of work to make the map feel different. Like, you've got the fall trees, you've got the European inspired sort of architecture and everything, but it is a completely new map, and it's massive. I spent the whole first few hours of the game just exploring, ignoring the story missions, and I was having so much fun, because it's just basically everything I love about both Dying Light games mashed together. I've got Kyle Crane back, you know, from the first game, one of the greatest main characters of all time, so that's excellent. And then I've got the excellent combat, the excellent parkour, the excellent map design, the excellent aesthetic. Plus, on top of that, there's a lot of new stuff, like, you know, having guns from the start. They aren't an afterthought that was added in years after the game came out. And you can use zombie powers. So, like, there's a little bar, just like God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, that charges up, and then you go beast mode, and you just beat the ever-living crap out of these zombies. You're ripping them limb from limb. You got a whole skill tree that gives you more abilities to beat the crap out of zombies. And the best part is, this is the most survival horror inspired version of Dying Light we've ever gotten. The nights are pitch black. The gore is amped up to 11. The zombies are actually a threat. Like, you can get swarmed by zombies like the Dawn of the Dead remake, and the combat is the most visceral it's ever been. I've never liked blunt weapons in these Dying Light games. They just feel like they take way more hits to actually kill a zombie, and they're harder to swing. They just take longer, but there are plenty of knives and swords and different sort of bladed weapons you can use throughout this game. And there's also this whole like military inspired aesthetic to a lot of the weapons now. It just feels like everything I love from Resident Evil, like Hunk and the whole tactical umbrella core, mashed together with everything I love about Dying Light, and it's just great from top to bottom. And unlike Borderlands 4, which is a game that I really enjoy playing but don't like the performance in, this one performs great. In performance mode, it's a hard lock 1080p 60 FPS. If you're on Pro, it's around 1440p hard lock 60 FPS. There is dynamic resolution, but it never really kicks in. Like, the resolution stays stays constant, as does the frame rate, and it just feels really good to play. I don't know what happened between Dying Light 2 and this game, but like Dying Light 2 had a really rough launch from everything from performance down to overall game quality. If this was Dying Light 2, this would be a much bigger franchise, I think. I think this would have actually gotten more players than the first game because it's just that good. It's awesome. I'm still pretty early on in the game. I'm about 3 or 4 hours in, but like the parkour feels great from the jump. And I love that you see Kyle Crane in the cutscenes. So like when you use different outfits in the game, they show up in the cutscenes. I'm pretty sure that's new. I don't remember if you ever saw Aiden in Dying Light 2, and I just played Dying Light 1 again, and I know you never see Kyle Crane in any of the cutscenes. So having the camera pull out and actually not have any stuttering or weird frame drops or anything, and just be this seamless sort of like gameplay to cutscene transition makes it feel like very AAA compared to the first two games. Like the second game had a AAA graphic style and gameplay style, but there was like that little bit of Eurojank still just mixed into the mix. This feels like the most AAA game Techland has ever released, and I'm glad that they waited, you know, that extra time to make sure it was actually finished, because it just makes it a better experience overall. So yeah, there's a lot of survival horror games coming out right now, but I think this should be the priority. I think it's a great game. It checks every box. There's some nitpicky stuff I could complain about, but everything about this package, from the performance to the presentation to the gameplay, is top notch. I have no complaints really that are worth mentioning in this video. I think it's definitely worth checking out. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.